Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for what I think is the third installation of this week's programming in support of International Open Access Week. Today is a panel presentation called Understanding Transformative Agreements. And I'm very excited to have with us today as panelists, we have Bob Boissy, who is Director of Account Development at Springer Nature, Sarah Whalen, Director of Open Research Americas for Wiley, and Dr. Christina Hubish, Open Access Business Analyst at Elsevier. And I'm Jeff Carroll, the Director of Collection Strategy here at Rutgers University Libraries, and I'll be your moderator today. I just want to take a few moments to set the stage and give an overview about what we mean when we say transformative agreements. First of all, we're very excited. We've made a page to list all of the agreements the libraries now have in place. It's almost 20 of them. And I might ask, since I can't get to other parts of my documents, if Yingting is on the presentation here or is watching, if Yingting, if you don't mind dropping in the link to this page, as well as the contact us email at the bottom of the page so folks watching know where to go to find this information. We have almost 20 agreements now with publishers, and they're all listed here. If you just scan through them, you can see that they're predominantly in science, technology, engineering, and medicine. We do have a few covering social science and humanities. There's Cambridge University Press and John Benjamin's in here. We're hoping that will be the next wave of our transformative agreements, is to focus more on social sciences and humanities publishers. We think we've hit the critical mass with STEM publishers, particularly our representatives today represent the big three by far in STEM publishing: Elsevier, Springer Nature, and Wiley. And in fact, I think these three publishers alone account for probably 90% or so of all of the open access publishing output from Rutgers throughout all of these agreements. So we're very excited to have our panelists with us today from these particularly three big publishers. I don't even see the chat. Oh, there it is. Okay, maybe Yingting isn't with us. So once we pop out to the discussion part of the presentation, I'll drop in the links for this page, as well as how to contact us for details on this. I just want to give a little bit of an overview. This is, in a nutshell, what transformative agreements are. It's always been seen as a transitional effort toward full open access. In an ideal world, I think we think we will one day eventually get to full open access of all content, but we rarely find ourselves in ideal worlds. So I suspect we're going to be in a transitional environment for the foreseeable future. Transformative agreements, they're also known as read and publish. The whole idea behind this is trying to flip the model from a subscription-based cost to publication-based cost. So this helps address the inequity of somebody who can't afford a subscription or is affiliated with an institution that can't afford a subscription will now be able to get access without having to put out the cost of it. And then the cost for publication is really based on what it costs to publish an article. The advantages of doing this also help make the results of research more broadly available without cost barriers. The way we're doing it, having the libraries structure these agreements with the publishers so that we're footing the bill, relieves also the author or the researcher from the burden of paying the cost to publish. There's still an inequity for researchers who are at institutions that can't strike these agreements and cover those publication costs. So that's another part of the transition that we hope to one day solve. And then finally, these agreements provide a path for researchers to comply with funder and federal mandates to make published results available without cost to their readers. So without further ado, I'm going to jump in, and I think we'll start with Bob, if you don't mind, from Springer Nature.
Yeah, really appreciate the chance to speak folks today. Yes, I'm director of comp development for Springer Nature in the US and Canada. That means essentially it means customer success, trying to make sure that the content that has been invested in gets used. In today's context, what we're talking about today.
I need to interrupt. I think your volume, for some reason, comes out garbled. I apologize. Can't hear you now. Not yet.
Bob, I'm not sure. It felt like there was a time when we were testing that when you were just through your headset mic, and I don't know if it would make any difference to get away from the monitor a little bit, or it might be.
I could try that.
I heard something, but it's
just not good enough, huh? Maybe
it's actually less garbled though.
Less garbled if I move away. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I can try
And
that then.
Now, if we could just get the volume up a little bit, we'd be perfect.
Let me see if there's anything I can. Any better there?
It is better. Why don't we try that? And
Okay.
if anybody has any real, maybe turn on closed caption if anybody needs that.
Okay.
But I can hear you. I think we just have to focus. So
Okay.
Thanks, Bob.
All right. I'll try to. It's a quick presentation anyway, so that's good. Yeah, I just wanted to mention one thing at the front end is that we had a merger between Springer Log and Nature back in 2015. We're now doing a rebranding of our major Springer Link site. It's now called Springer Nature Link, but no URLs changed. So I just wanted to let you know about that. We can go to the next slide. So we talked about what a transformative agreement is and what it's trying to do. It's trying to make more content available open access to the world and give you chances to get your published research more available to more people and downloaded and read by more people than ever before. We've got lots of different agreements. Sometimes a lot of schools are in individual agreements. Some are as big as a whole country. And we've been doing it for some time now. We have year-on-year growth among the participating institutions. For us, Rutgers is included in the 2024 group, which is over 3,755 schools at this point, institutions, I should say. So they're growing. In other words, this is a thing that's really happening. It's not a fly-by-night kind of thing. Many, many institutions are involved. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So a couple of highlights. At the end of 2023, we have the complete data for that and a report for that. 44% of our primary research was published open access. So when you think about a big publisher like Springer Nature and 44% of all its output is being published open access, that's very significant at the end of 2023. But even more important is we think we're going to reach 50% by the end of 2024. So if you're wondering whether this is a real thing, is this really the way we're going? Yes, it is really the way we're going and how we're changing the way publishing is done. We published 44,500 OA articles via these transformative agreements. There is other ways to do it. An author can choose to pay his own article processing charge if he's not in the transformative agreement, but we published a lot within the transformative agreements. I'm not sure how many we will publish by the end of 2024 and how much we will publish in 2024, but I bet it'll be more, and TAs produce 7 times more OA articles than just individual articles paying charges. It's a big advantage. You're going to get almost guaranteed 6 times more downloads than articles published by subscription, the traditional subscription model in the same journals. So if your article goes in open access in one of these journals, yeah, it's going to do really well downloads wise. It's going to get almost 2 times more of the citations in the end, and a lot more altmetric attention. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Yeah, this is the one I really like because it's about you. It's about Rutgers. You're in, for Springer Nature, you're in agreement with 600 universities right now. We allocate these 7 universities in all. You can see them on the left. A total of 728 papers, and 501 of them have been used by the end of September. So we're going along at a good clip. We're probably going to hit the number that we, has been arranged in the contract. If you look at Rutgers by itself, I have data through mid-August. Yeah, I published 94 papers by mid-August, and I have the downloads worldwide for that at over 67, almost 68,000, so averaging 722 downloads per paper, which I think is a very good number. You can see the other schools in your thing. Okay, we can go down one more. We're almost done here. This is just to remind you that we do have help for authors who are wondering how this works. In the easiest terms to understand, journal submission of papers is the same as it's always been. You just submit. Only thing that changes is when you get to the post acceptance article has been accepted. Then you identify yourself. You say, I'm from Rutgers. It helps if you sign things with your affiliation email, Rutgers, EDU email. And then you're known to be identifying as Rutgers, and you take it, you advance to being able to select open access. This is just to show you that open access is not a middle management conspiracy. It's actually driven from the top down by our CEO, who's saying that we want to reach a fully OA future. Okay, and then the last slide, I think is next. This shows you the what we call a landing page for our agreement. It happens to be that you're in NERL agreement. That's the former Northeast Regional Library Consortium, but yeah, you might not remember NERL. You don't not expect it to. It's a library term. If you were to browse Springer Nature Rutgers agreement, just remember that much. Springer Nature Rutgers agreement, you're going to find Rutgers pages, you're going to find Springer Nature pages, and you're going to find all the information you need about how to publish open access to us and which journals are available to you. Okay, that's it for me.
Thanks, Bob. And there was one slide that moved without you prompting me. I think I had a truck going by outside and the vibration moved the slide.
That's okay.
Sorry about
we
that.
didn't miss anything. We're good.
Okay, good.
Jeff,
go ahead, Tony.
We do have a question that showed up in our thing. They wanted to know if Bob could share the link to the workflow for authors. That would be really helpful.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, the workflow for authors. I will punch that into the chat. It's available. It's available through this landing page. So I'll make sure that you
okay.
Chat to cut and paste. Yep.
And then we have another 2 set of questions. One is, are any changes expected with the recent IPO, such as the number of journals available, editorial staff, or to TAs more broadly?
Wow, somebody's been following us pretty closely. Okay. Actually, no, there are no changes anticipated at this time based on the IPO. Imagine that everyone who's choosing to invest, mostly in Germany, in us, understands that we're on a very direct path to open access publishing, and that changes are not warranted. The number of journals available from us on the Rutgers published list is 2,043 different Springer journals. There's also other imprints, including ADIS and Palgrave Macmillan and a few others. So no changes.
Okay. And the final question that appeared is, I know that different journals have different APCs. How is the fee determined, and how can authors review the range of editorial services, etc., that may be added or included?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Now, what people need to know about the Transformative Agreement is that we've negotiated ahead of time with both NERL and with Rutgers, and Jeff could probably explain this more about an article processing charge for these Springer hybrid journals. So that has been negotiated as a kind of a flat number, and so the portion of the library budget goes to allowing read access to a whole lot of journals, but then another portion of the library budget has gone to get that big list of articles available for the 2024 year that Rutgers people can publish into. So in a sense, the APC is not something that's like a retail number that's going to vary by journal when it comes to all those 2,043 journals in our agreement. Let's see. We do publish like the retail APCs that can be found most easily by looking at any particular journal on our site and exploring the journal, going into more information about the journal. And those will be available right on each journal homepage. I think that's the best way to attack it.
Great. Thank you, Bob. And thanks for those great questions. We'll move on now to Sarah Whalen with Wiley. Sarah?
Sure. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Whalen. I'm the Director of Open Research Americas at Wiley. I work on open access policy development, trends in open research, and stakeholder engagement on topical issues covering North America, Central America, and South America. Thanks. So I just want to give a quick overview of Wiley's current transformational agreement landscape. We currently have 103 transformational agreements, and that number continues to grow every quarter. Our transformational agreements cover over 40 countries, over 80,000 articles, and over 2,800 institutions. And we currently have 60% of our published OA articles that are covered by a transformational agreement. Next slide, please. Thank you. Under our Wiley Transformational Agreement, open access research has received 3.4 times more views, 1.4 times more citations, and 4 times more altmetric attention compared to subscription articles within the same time frame. Wiley's position on open access is clear. We prioritize rigorous peer review, version of record as the permanent, reliable, up-to-date research record. We support preprints, but we also want every preprint to be linked to the final published version of record at the time of publication. We support author choice for licensing, and we also prioritize investments in tools and processes to optimize engagement and discoverability of all Wiley published research. The benefits to the researcher are increased visibility, rights retention, and ensured compliance with institutional and funder mandates. Benefits to society are more immediate access to the latest research, greater returns on investment in research, accelerating innovation, and facilitating reuse of open data and building on previous research. I didn't include a slide in terms of our resources for researchers. I was going to drop some links into the chat during our discussion. We have a robust author services site that has links to guides that can help guide the researchers through submissions, but also through various topics related to publishing, open access, etc. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Bob, do you see any questions so far for Bob? Tony, do you see any questions for Sarah?
do not see any questions at the moment for Sarah, but we would probably have time at the end of the session for any additional questions for all of our panelists.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks again, Sarah. So next up is Dr. Christina Hubish from Elsevier. Christina?
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Christina Hubish. My role at Elsevier is I am an open access business analyst. I have a background in teaching and research and science education, and I moved over to publishing into Elsevier a little over 6 years ago now. You can go to the next slide. Great, thank you. So in the last 6 years, we've been doing a lot of listening. We're listening to our communities. We're testing a lot of different models for open access agreements. And really that happens through collaborating with different stakeholders that are really key in the movement, right? So funders and governments, researchers and readers, and then institutions like Rutgers, where we have a transformative agreement in place that has started this year in 2024 as well. And then of course, publishers, where I sit. And my specific role is I work with the institutions to set up open access agreements that are essentially sponsored by the library to enable university authors to be able to select open access in hybrid journals. You can go to the next slide. And these are essentially the results, right? So just to put a couple of numbers to the landscape at Elsevier, there are now 150,000 gold open access articles on the ScienceDirect platform, and that is a 26% growth on the previous year. So some of our counterparts like Springer, they're publishing a lot more open access, 50%. We're a little bit lower, we're 30%. We were slower to the uptake with open access, and we recognize that, but we are growing quite a bit as a result. We now have over 2,000 institutions that are publishing through an open access transformative agreements, and we have over 85 agreements with different institutes and funders globally. And then in terms of our journal portfolio, out of our hybrid journals, we have 2,800 hybrid journals that where 97% of them are offering the option to publish gold open access. And then on top of that, we have our fully gold open access portfolio, which has now grown to over 700 journals, which just to give you perspective, I think back in 2019, I think that number was like 365. So it's almost doubled in 5 years, which is really great. And then as well, all of our offers continue to often offer a free green open access option. And then we continue to make open archives available for 140 journals in the Elsevier portfolio, which actually includes cell press as well. So after 12 months, all cell press articles become free and publicly available to read. So that's just a quick update from Elsevier, and I will hand it back to Jeff unless there are any questions.
Great. Thank you, Christina. And I neglected to let our audience know at the outset, the way I wanted to structure this was that after these brief presentations from each of the representatives here, I would ask a series of questions to get discussion started, and then we address questions from the audience. I do want to see if we have, okay, no direct questions for Christina. Tony?
Ying Ting had raised her hand.
Oh, okay.
I'm happy to give her the floor so she can ask her question, if that's okay.
Sure. Yingting, is it specific to Christina's presentation, or well, let's go ahead and let Yingting
to both. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't do anything. That's why. My question is for both Springer and Elsevier's reps. Are you thinking of increasing our coverage to cover the gold journals, OA journals, for our transformative agreements? Because that's one of the questions I got the most, and also seems to be most concerned from our researchers when it's just covering the hybrid journals, not the gold one. Are you thinking of expanding our agreements to cover those gold journals, to publishing in the gold OA journals?
Why don't you go first? Yeah, you can go ahead.
Oh, okay, sure. Thank you. Yes, so with transformative agreements, the way that we are thinking through them at Elsevier is that journals that have subscriptions in place are currently subsidizing the peer review process. And when we look to include read and publish in a contract, we look at journals that include options for reading subscriptions and then options for open access publishing. For fully gold journals, those two options do not exist, right? There's only one option, which is a pay to publish open access model. So we do not look to include in fully gold and transformative agreements because we consider it already transformed or already fully open access. So we do keep a focus on the hybrid component of that, but I do want to emphasize that counter to that, fully gold is not always accessible for everyone, and we fully recognize that. So instead of institutionalizing APC discounting or inclusion for fully gold, we've actually globalized those types of policies. So this year we were able to release a new pilot. It's called our geo-pricing pilot, where institutions in countries that would typically qualify under programs like Research for Life can receive waivers for fully gold journals to be able to publish openly. So that's been our take this year, and that's really in response to the authors and the way they've engaged with transformative agreements so far. But I'll defer to Bob to hear what they have to say as well.
I mean, you heard that, Elsevier has about 700 fully open access journals. We have 693 at last count. BMC and things like that are well known, been around a long time. And we do understand that people would like to make agreements specifically for those. And we have made agreements specifically for those, and it is a kind of a negotiation. If the institution which wishes to go that way, a place like National Institutes of Health, NIH, for example, did go that way and made an agreement with us along those lines, negotiated agreement for the APCs, and because they wanted to do that, and they were able to do that. Not every institution has the wherewithal to do that. But we are open to those kinds of agreements. We definitely also do plenty of waiver arrangements in certain parts of the world when it comes to fully open access. We have a very robust program there, which helps with the equity issues. But we've started along the line of transformative agreements with our hybrid journals. There's many more journals, there's 2,200 of those. And we would really like to get them to open access as a priority. So that's kind of our thinking. But we do make open access, fully open access agreements with institutions. It's not beyond the realm of discussion, and certainly we would discuss it with any consortium or individual institution that wanted to do that.
Thank you, Bob.
Great question, Ying-Ting. And on Sarah's behalf with Wiley, our agreement with Wiley does make all journals, it includes all journals, including gold open access, but the way it's structured, without going into too much detail there, is the Big Ten Academic Alliance has created a separate pool of money, sort of like what Bob was talking about, to support that gold open access content being covered under the agreement. And it's just leveraging the strength of the BTAA on that. So thanks for that question, Ying-Ting. I wanted to start my questions off. And I think Sarah touched on this, but I want to make sure that we have a chance to reiterate. So in the past, some concern has been expressed about whether articles published open access went through the same editorial and peer review rigor of more traditionally published content. Can you speak about this type of concern? If anybody wants to jump in on that, otherwise, maybe Bob, you can start us off.
Hopefully the volume on my is a little bit better for me now.
We hear you a lot better.
Yeah, it's these little things, that connect. You have to make sure they're completely turned on, or they don't. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
I've had that before too. Yes.
I hate it when that happens. Anyway, yeah, I mean, this is near and dear to my heart. I'm a librarian to start with. I have a library degree, and so I relate to my library clients very well in thinking about the challenges that they have faced with trying to direct authors when it comes to, reliable journal publishing with integrity, with peer review, with all the things that need to be in place. And in the early days, there were lots of these forays with predatory publishing that really publishers that had no peer review set up, although they said they did. They had very little in the way of editorial board members, although they said they did, and they put people's names on things that did not have permission. So there was a lot of problems, and the idea of so-called vanity publishing had been around for a very long time, and frankly, some of the big vendors, aggregators and things have offered vanity book publishing for quite a while. Excuse me. But nowadays, you see the biggest publishers, scholarly publishers in the world, like the ones you have on this video today, talking about OA as their way to publish going forward. It is, in fact, how we do things, and so we have to be responsible for integrity and peer review, and the same articles that are being published by the old subscription traditional model in all these 2,200 hybrid journals that we have. We have open access articles. They have to go through the exact same process because we don't know what path the author is going to choose at the end. Authors can choose to place their article subscription, or they can choose to place it open access if they're in an agreement and have the ability, or they can choose to pay. All that happens after acceptance. You've got to go through the same hoops as you did before, and the science has to be good, solid science, and it will go through all the same rigorous steps. Got to assure everybody that we're not going to risk our 150-year-old publishing name on something like that. It's got to be high quality.
Great response. Thank you, Bob. Christina, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I will add something to that as well, is that I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing so much growth in our hybrid open access portfolio. One, because they're included in our transformative agreements, and that's our biggest portfolio of 1,800 journals. But two, when the articles are going through peer review, it's not a different process, right? It's the same peer review process. It's not flagged differently because it was marked as potentially hybrid open access versus subscription. So it is going through the same exact peer review process. So for any author who is confused about any of those kind of misconceptions with fully gold or gold open access publishing, it does provide them a little bit of a safety net, I guess, in a sense. But I think one of the biggest challenges is just finding time to be able to educate authors about what it means to publish in gold open access, right? So that they're educated on everything that Bob just pointed out, right? All of the predatory kind of implications of gold and the kind of idea of publishing quantity instead of quality, right? All of those things come into play. So I think it just takes time to learn that stuff and build trust. And our hybrid portfolio has been able to do that really well because of the blind peer review.
Wonderful. And Sarah, you had mentioned in your presentation that you go through the same process. Do you have anything to add from the Wiley standpoint?
So as I mentioned, Wiley's position is rigorous peer review for all research. We do support preprints, but we do require them to be linked to the final version of record upon publication. It's very important to us to make sure that every piece of research goes through rigorous and research integrity checks, peer review, and we are constantly investing in technology to stay ahead of the risks that are appearing with technology in terms of paper mills and just overall fraud in publishing. And we regularly conduct pilots. We have a new-ish AI team that is just very focused on it, basically 24/7. And overall, it's very important to us. I would also agree that one of the challenges is communicating this to researchers and making sure they're aware of all the tools, all the resources we have. One thing I would suggest is Wiley has a couple social media channels, either go to Wiley or Wiley and Research, and we often post videos and infographics about the tools that we have for researchers, the work we're doing in peer review and integrity checks and all of that.
Thanks, Sarah. And speaking of the tools for researchers, you and Bob dropped into the chat links to those tools for both Wiley and Springer. Thank you very much. Christina, do you know, I assume Elsevier has tools as well. Do you have a?
I do. I was actually just copying the links as you were speaking.
All right.
So
Perfect.
you caught
Thank
me
you so
red-handed.
much.
I'll add those right in.
Perfect. And then a question for all of you. I don't think I saw this up in your presentations. So just for our audience, how are Rutgers authors identified as being eligible under the library's agreements with your respective publishers? Maybe we'll start with Sarah this time.
That would be great. I actually have a link that goes to our institutional funder tool. I'm going to drop it in the chat, and that is available on the author services site as well. And that guides you through to help you find out who's eligible.
Great, thank you. And Christina?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, it's
confusing me.
how are Rutgers authors identified as being eligible under the library's agreement with your respective publishers? It's and just some context, it's a question we often get from our researchers before they start to go through the process. So there's just an opportunity to explain.
I understand. Okay. Yeah. So typically when an author is going through the process of submitting an article, right, you have kind of the administrative corresponding author is what we call it. So really that one person who's submitting the article and editorial manager, right, and kind of tracking the peer review and dealing with comments and resubmissions, et cetera. Once the article gets to acceptance, every article goes through the same kind of like post-acceptance journey, if you will. And there's, I think, 7 or 8 steps included in that journey where you're entering a lot of metadata. Who are your other corresponding authors or affiliated authors, right? Do you have funding that you need to acknowledge, et cetera? So when you are in a transformative agreement, you go through that same process, but instead of, whatever it is, I think it's 7 steps, right? Now you have 8 steps. And one of those steps now becomes, okay, your library has invested in a transformative agreement. And as a result, you have an option to publish, right, that with the APC covered. And you can actually see on there, right, that it's like the price is slashed out and it says 0 to confirm that authors won't receive an invoice, et cetera. But the way that it's triggered is that the author types in that they're from Rutgers. So as long as you are typing in, Rutgers University into that metadata, the system will pick up that you are affiliated with the institution. And then when you get to that APC moment, you will see the price, cut down to 0. So as long as you're affiliated and associating it with your article metadata, then you should be set.
Great, thanks, Christina. And Bob, anything to add?
Yeah, it's very, very, very similar to what Christina just said. The same journal submission process, and then the acceptance, and then you say a few things about yourself. And one of the things you say about yourself is, your affiliation. You confirm Rutgers University as your affiliation. Just by saying that as the corresponding author, the system picks up that this is already in the TA, in the transformative agreement, bundle. It's in the track. It helps a little bit because sometimes approval managers like yourself, Jeff, who sit behind the scenes and see the papers going through the process, they will ask for more elements of identification. You can ask for, the library can ask for, the email to be an affiliated email, a Rutgers, EDU email, and that will then fortify, that who the person is. We even have a way to identify IPs, but IPs are kind of getting old real fast, and your authors may not be on the IP that is associated with Rutgers at the time. So those are like a fallback mechanism that is sometimes used. But for the most part, the author, the corresponding author, the one who's doing the work to submit the journal article is just self-affiliating, and that puts that paper into the channel where the open access option is going to be offered to them, clearly offered to them. And if there's one message I want to get across is that, Rutgers University Libraries, speaking for you, sorry, does want your authors to take that option. You've gone down the road to making the deal with us, the publishers, and that's for the purpose of letting your authors publish open access. So if they're thinking, well, maybe I should go the subscription route because then that wouldn't cost anybody anything. No, Rutgers has already invested. You're supposed to use the yes option and go open access, and that's the important thing that we're trying to convey here, that we're all on the same page with open access.
Yep, great, thanks, Bob. And I think sometimes the researcher will investigate the journal that they want to publish in. They'll see open access fees up front and get a little bit nervous about that. So I think anything we can do to allay those concerns is well warranted. I do think, as you mentioned, Bob, from my standpoint, seeing it on the administrative side, these things go through, and we have to actively approve the ones for Elsevier and Springer. Wiley is an automatic thing, and we review them after the fact to see if anybody got through that shouldn't have, and then we'll work to tighten that up in the future. Using a Rutgers.edu email address is probably the surest way for our researchers to get identified as being a Rutgers affiliate and not having to be charged.
Yeah. We know that Gmail is very convenient and people get really hooked on it. Understood. But for this kind of stuff, publishing maybe.
I think one of the challenges with that too, right, from an author perspective, is that if you change institutions, if you're a postdoc in a one-year postdoc or your early non-tenured position, right, then you lose that institutional email, which I will say, plug for the support center, you can go back to Elsevier and change your metadata, of course, right? So we still want to use our institutional emails, but if you've got 30 to 50 articles that you've published now, are you going to go back and correct everyone to update your email with every publisher? Maybe not, right? So it's also a challenge around like trying to accommodate like community practices that just make sense versus like proper counting for the transformative agreements, right? So it's just always that challenge. It might be a good time to like kind of drift into the retroactive component of this, because you mentioned that sometimes authors might see an open access charge even when they're just looking at a guide for authors on the journal website and kind of get spooked, right? Especially in hybrid journals where the prices can be a little bit higher, right? So I just wanted to mention that at least for Elsevier, you can kind of flip back and forth as much as you want. So you can initially say hybrid open access or subscription. When you go to submit, when you get to an acceptance journey, you resubmit that decision. So you are not hooked to, if you see an APC listed for $4,000, you are not wed to that price on submission by any means. We will not still send you an invoice until you reconfirm that that's something that you would like. So you do get the choice multiple times throughout the journey to change. And then what's more, if you decide, I don't have, the funds for this right now, and then later on in the same calendar year, you do receive a grant, for example, to cover that APC, you can go back to Elsevier and retroactively change to open access. So if you publish in a calendar year, right, from January 1 to December 31 of this year, you have until January 31 of the following year, so up until the end of January next year, to go back and change it. And with the benefit of Rutgers having a transformative agreement in place is that you can reach out to authors who have chosen subscription and see if they would like to utilize part of your quota as well. And that also is allowed until January of the following year. So we give you some flexibility in trying to make that choice.
Oh, that's great. I actually didn't know that piece of it. So thanks.
Oh,
thanks,
good. Okay, great.
And I think Bob, Sarah, we don't have mechanisms to do it retroactively with either of your publishers at the moment, correct?
For us, if you change the method that you want open access, if you decide to change it, it's a simple email to a specific department. I think you answer a couple questions about it, and then they do the work for you, basically. So we allow it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
thanks.
we I guess we're the you know the tail end of the situation on this. We have really focused on trying to get the message out to authors to what I said before, to select open access. You know, when they're in a transformative agreement, be aware that you're in one. Select open access. The library really wants you to. So we've been more on that trail. We don't really support the business of, you know, kind of submitting it as subscription and then coming along, you know, a week or a month or however long later and saying, I want to make it open access after all under the transformative agreement. Becomes quite difficult for us currently to do that. I'm not going to say that we will not, you know, kind of change a policy on that at some point in the future if it gets to be really critical. Right now, we're trying to get to our authors ahead of time and really emphasize selecting open access as the way to go.
Thank you. We're at 12:45, so I want to open it up again to the audience for questions. Let's see, I see a couple of things in chat. I think, no, that's all of our links. I do see a question.
Jeff, there is a question that arrived, and this is for all the panelists. Do your transformative agreements include automated deposit of articles published under the agreement into the author's institutional repository via transfer protocols like SWORD or FTP?
That's a great, go ahead, Sarah.
Sure. I know that we do automatic transfer to PubMed after publication. I believe we can also do it to repositories after publication, but I'm not specifically sure on what the method is. I believe FTP is likely a way to do it, but I wasn't sure about the first option you provided.
Yeah, we don't have any auto deposit for the transformative agreements specifically, no.
Yeah, we don't have any automated deposit for the transformative agreements either. We know what the SWORD protocol is. We've used it before, and we have done this with one university client as much as a pilot as anything else. And so that's an area that I think we are still open to discussions on that. I only say that, I don't want to overcommit my company, but I can tell you that I'm very aware of the one university that we do it with, and we do follow the SWORD protocol, and we do submit all their, you know, corresponding author accepted manuscripts to their repository, which are, you know, about as good as it gets. You know, I think that's an area where that we could be explored more.
Yeah, I think, you know, open access, right? It's still kind of, well, especially transformative is really still in its infancy with like, especially relative to traditional reading agreements, right? Where we knew kind of exactly how to set up journal entitlements and then flip on a switch, right, on January 1, whereas these read and publish deals are just so complex. And Jeff, you noted already that you have to do some like manual kind of administration around the deal. So it's not quite as simple as just what was that reading contract, right? So I think that's like a really big part of it too.
Yeah, and just to circle back, we've had internal conversations here at Rutgers. I think I know where this question is coming from. And we have the data of what articles and what authors are publishing through these agreements for Rutgers. I wonder if there's some way we can use that data to ingest those articles ourselves. So that's something we might be reaching out to each of you to explore down the road, or your teams to explore down the road.
Yeah, and when we hear requests like this, right, this automatic deposit, right, I think that's something we're going to continue to get requests about, and there will likely be something that lands in that development pipeline for open access specifically, right, for these transformative agreements. And so it's important for us too to kind of like maintain those communication channels like with the libraries, but then also with the authors to see like technically what's making sense and what, like who needs support and which steps of the journey, right, to make things a little easier. So it's good to know.
Yep. Good.
I wanted to mention one other thing, that since you're willing to consider, a little piece of the work on your end, I'm typing into the chat our page for APIs, application programming interfaces. A lot of publishers have these for different purposes. We have a whole, website set up to show you about and make available APIs. We have metadata APIs. We happen to have an open access API. All the papers that you publish under the TA are open access. That means they're available to the world in a lot of different ways, but one of them is through an API. And if you can figure out how to do your queries to the API, you certainly could pull the open access papers on your own. So that's available. I'm guessing it's available from more than just us. So anyway, I'm just putting it into the chat if there's a desire to explore the open access API further. It's okay. It's not the SWORD protocol depositing to you. It's you kind of pulling it, but one way or another, there are ways to do this kind of stuff.
So I'm going to give a cryptic little message out there. Joseph, if I suspect you're on this part of the audience, if you could pick up that link in the chat. You may already know about this given your conversations with Springer, but that might be something useful. Christina, Sarah, do you know if you have anything similar with your publishers?
I don't know, but I can find out. It's a different department, so I don't want to misspeak.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, given your
well.
size, I wouldn't be surprised if you do have it, but
there's a sizable, developer portal for the APIs. So I imagine open access is one of them, if not coming, right? But I will check on that and let you know.
Yeah,
fantastic.
There's just no reason not to freely distribute your open access content as much as possible. I mean, authors, we'll get into this, but authors can choose different licenses, right? Different licenses to put on their open access publications. And it can be very free and freewheeling, CC-BY, or it can be a little tighter, CC-BY NC with, no commercial use, or NC-ND, no commercial, no derivative use. So authors have some control here. And what we distribute via APIs will, follow that. But essentially, there's no reason for us not to be allowing the world to have open access content.
Excellent. Hopefully we can make some progress on it going forward. So a question, have any of you that you know of encountered problems authors have had with the OA publishing process through transformative agreements?
I would say what I mentioned before about communications and just knowing that, one, your institution covered what they cover, if they have a TA with Wiley and what that means. Often it's like we have a ton of tools and resources and we think we're sending them out to the right place, but we're still trying to figure out the best way to communicate to researchers about what's available to them. And again, I'll do a pitch for our social media sites are a great way to find out what we're doing. I would say that's the biggest issue.
Yeah, one of the things that we do is if an author who has a TA who has a transformative read and publish agreement at their institution and is offered the ability to have their paper published open access without charge to them, they have that opportunity, but we normally don't force them, literally force them to take it. We do allow them to what we call opt out, right? So they can choose the subscription path. What we do though is if they do that and they're in a TA with plenty of papers left in the TA and they just choose not to do it, we do ask them. We have one question, and they can choose from a drop-down list of why they made that decision. And so, yeah, we do see the things that authors have in their heads about things. And we make those opt-out decisions available back to the library approval manager so they know what their authors are thinking. So some authors think, even though they've seen what they've seen, they still think that they'd rather publish open access because they'd rather publish subscription than they would open access. They just say flat out that they'd rather do that. Now, what might be underlying that? Maybe they think tenure and promotion hangs on it. Maybe my open access article in Diabetologia is not going to be treated as seriously in tenure and promotion times as a subscription, closed access, they call it, article in Diabetologia, even though it's the same journal in the same issue in the same year, but they're worried that somebody's going to tag it as open access.
Author and reader perception is very interesting. I know authors who don't trust an article until it's assigned a volume in an issue. They don't even trust online first, right? So different researchers just have different protocols that they've developed to kind of, put trust into their own work, things that they think that help like establish integrity, which sometimes it does help, right? So they're not bad, things to kind of like develop in your practice. But I'd say overall, like Elsevier is a very similar kind of, it's not really an issue, but all of these transformative agreements, the success of them is really centered on author choice, right? And just like Bob has said, and I think Sarah as well, we don't force authors to do anything they don't want to do. We don't force societies to partner with us for transformative agreements if they don't want to. All of this is based on opting into a movement, right? This is a movement that is for a community of researchers. So if they're opting in, then we will support them through these agreements. But if they don't, then we give the library the data to go talk to authors and see what's going on and try to educate as much as we can. But ultimately, the decision does still fall to them. So it can be challenging for the library because, maybe this is like an entity that you're investing in, and then what happens if you don't use it all, right? So it can just be very challenging to try to get faculty all on board to do exactly what you want 100% of the time. So I'd say that's our biggest challenge.
Great, thank you. We just have 3 minutes left. So I'm just going to throw out, I did see a Q&A, but it says post meeting, and I think that's something for our team to follow up with. So I'm just going to throw out, it was mentioned earlier about the Springer IPO. It's now a publicly traded company. And that makes all 3 of the big STEM publishers now publicly traded companies. So we can see, financial statements, annual reports, that kind of thing. Just a very broad question. What is in it for the publisher? You've kind of started making this big transition from the traditional subscription model to open access. So I just want to give you a chance to indicate, in a few brief words, what might be in it for your publisher. Bob, I see you nodding your head. So
from my point of view, it's survival. I just don't want to put it any way differently than that. It's an existential question. The library community, the government research funding community, European funding bodies, all the mandates that are coming down, you know, have said that scholarly communication, science publishing has to become open access. It just has to. We have had enough pressure, and they always say in economics, you know, marketing pressure is eventually going to do it, you know, and eventually it has. And just the fact that things are digital now and it can be made open access to the world has kind of driven everyone to the point where they've just said, this is the way scholarly communications has to be. So what's in it for us is basically survival. And the survival of publishing at scale. You know, we don't see a way to go back. Let me put it that way.
Great, that's a helpful perspective.
Yeah, I would say similarly. I think we're at a point where we're kind of viewing this like, what's in it for us? I think it's really just like pluralization of the market. There's more options, more models. We're kind of still testing and learning. Right now, Elsevier still is publishing more subscription content than open access, but we are listening to our authors and responding. So that's why things like transformative agreements have come about, right? So I imagine that in the next 5 years, policies will continue to change. Hopefully we get updates on OSTP being fully funded from Congress finally, crossing your fingers. So there's going to continue to be a lot more changes. We don't know what the impetus will be, but to Bob's point, it's survival. These communities of researchers, they need journals to continue to communicate and operate and preserve their work in perpetuity in a written record, right? So as long as that demand still exists, then it's our duty to respond to what those communities need.
Excellent. Sarah, anything to add to those?
Oh, definitely. As I mentioned before, one of Wiley's top priorities has always been engagement and discovery of our research. We invest in that heavily, and you know, the more research we can get out there, the more people can connect, and you know, it just makes science better, and that's something that we're very proud of. And then a second area, you know, as we talk about the future of publishing, is, you know, we're right on the cusp of understanding AI and how AI can be incorporated into all parts of our life. And I think right now, AI is very important to Wiley. As I mentioned before, we have an entire AI team that's experimenting and piloting and working with the technology sector. And I think it's just a very interesting time to be in publishing, but particularly a very interesting time to work at Wiley and watch how this industry can interact with new technology in different ways, and we can be leader in that progress.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. We're out of time. I want to thank the audience for joining us and the fantastic questions that came. And I particularly am very grateful and thankful to you, Sarah, Christina, and Bob for joining us today and sharing your thoughts on this. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was very enjoyable. Love a good panel discussion. So thank you. Great.
Good.
Take
Thank
care,
you
everyone.
all.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.